But what impact does reducing report and proposal development time by up to 70% have on an AEC professional's workload and job satisfaction?
Oh yeah, I mean it's pretty massive. I would speak to the job satisfaction part first. And when you have users saying, "Thank you for inventing Quire. You have changed my world," or "You make me look good in the eyes of my customer." Those are two actual quotes from our users. Like that, I mean, that means the world to me on a personal level.
Welcome to this episode of the AEC Engineering and Technology Podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping engineering professionals find technology that fits their needs. I am your host, Nick Hyam, and in this episode, we have the pleasure of speaking with Chris Connell, CEO, and Kelly Stratton, president and founder, both from Quire, who will be speaking about the evolving needs of technical report creation in the AEC industry and strategies for AEC companies to navigate economic and competitive challenges. With that, let's jump into today's episode. Okay, it's now time for our conversation of the week with Chris Connell and Kelly Stratton. Kelly and Chris, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, right? Technical report writing. So we're going to jump right into it. And Kelly, we'll start with a question for you.
Sure.
Can you tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself, what you do on a daily basis, and what inspired you to create your company, Quire?
Yeah, for sure. I'm Kelly Stratton. I'm the founder, president, and chief product officer here at Quire. I'm essentially responsible for shaping and executing the product strategy of our company and overseeing the whole product lifecycle of our platform. So that means I work with my team to establish our development roadmap. I try to identify market trends, understand the customer needs, and ultimately I'm trying to create a really compelling product that our users can't live without. I don't have a background in software at all. I'm not a computer programmer by any means whatsoever. I'm actually a civil and environmental engineer by trade, and I worked as an environmental consultant for a number of years at the beginning of my career. And I wrote, how do we say, an unhealthy number of words. Just part of the job. You write a lot of technical reports in that business. And it was done in support of compliance, environmental due diligence, remediation, that sort of thing. But over time, my work just felt less and less like the career I originally signed up for. And a lot of that had to do with report writing. Burnout kind of set in for me. So I left. I ended up moving into a sales position with an environmental database company. And in that role, I was actually selling data to the technical people who were doing a lot of the similar work that I was doing in my previous role. And they were all struggling with it in the same ways. So I remember distinctly having the total quintessential, that light bulb moment, the one like being over your head. In my boss's office, we were having our regular sales meeting, and we were talking about needing a tool like this, like our customers needing some sort of report writing platform. And I have no idea why I thought I could pull that off, but I'm just like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it. And that was 14 years ago now.
Yeah, amazing. And that's a lot of, what our guests tell us, Kelly, is they were in practice and industry. They had this kind of one nagging problem that really motivated them to either go off on their own or create something that solved it, which is sounds exactly like what you've kind of found yourself doing.
Yeah, pain brings change to our lives, right? So it started out with a career change and then becoming an entrepreneur was something I didn't really ever expect that I would do, but I'm certainly glad I did.
And Chris, moving over to you, can you introduce yourself to the listeners as well and tell us a little bit more about how you ended up joining Quire?
Sure. So I'm Chris Connell. I'm the CEO of Quire, working with Kelly as our founder. So I'm not a practitioner of technical report writing, never have been, but I've been pretty fortunate in my past lives to work with companies that have put together solutions that have really kind of reimagined the way an old process could be recast and make a really big impact to companies. And that was probably the first big draw to me, to Quire. They were taking this process that was relatively overlooked. It had been done the exact same way for years and years, maybe decades. And she reimagined it And that was a huge draw for me to come to Quire because it reminded me of several of my past experiences in other places. That was draw number one. Draw number two was Kelly, because Kelly not only reimagined it, she had the courage and of her convictions to kind of go forward. She created this wonderful company, more than 100 customers, flourishing. And I consider it an honor to come help her get it to the next level and scale it. And the third thing for me is that our customers. So one of the things I discovered when I first started talking to Kelly and meeting the Quire folks is I was just amazed at how customers, when they first engage with Quire, they might start off pretty small. They might look at one service line or one report type or something like that. And then in the matter of months or maybe in the first year, all of a sudden they start scaling this, and they're doing this organically. And that was really, really powerful to me. So the average customer today, for instance, in Quire, I think manages or delivers or creates 9.7 different report types in our system. And a lot of that has been organic. They just figured out that, geez, if I can use it over here on geotechnical reports, I can apply it to ESAs or PCAs or any of the other various reports that they do. And to me, that was really fascinating. It told me that Quire was scratching a really massive itch in the industry, and this was the real deal. So those are the three things that pulled me in, Nick.
And Chris, I think that's really cool to hear, because you're coming as an outsider, right? Not having maybe worked in the business or done technical report writing before, but you're able to see the value in something like this and what software can do for our customers and end users.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, customers wouldn't proliferate this through their organization unless they were getting huge benefits. And I'm sure we'll talk about it later on in the conversation, but seeing customers save as much as 40, 50, 60% of the time that it took them to create a report, seeing them talk to us about things like first-time approval rates, right? So getting a report right the first time, we had one customer who told us that's improved by over 50% since they started using Quire. So when you start attaching those really quantifiable benefits to what Kelly put in place, it was basically a no-brainer for me to come join her.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. And Kelly, back to you. So, you've got some great experience, right, in the civil and environmental world, working directly in the industry. In your experience, what are the most common challenges AEC professionals face in creating technical report and commercial proposals?
I mean, aside from not losing consciousness during the process.
It's an adventure, isn't it?
I'll just to me, the top three, and I'm projecting a little because these are the things that I thought were really challenging. So I think managing minutia, there's a shocking number of steps needed to author and assemble and deliver a high quality technical report product. I don't think people realize it from the outside, between the formatting, the data collection, data entry, the coordination of the multiple people involved in the process, of the hundreds of thousands of reports performed in Quire, created in Quire. The average number of contributors is 4 people. So that's the average. 4 people contribute to every technical report. That's just part of the nature of these documents. So managing multiple projects at once, consultants don't always have the luxury of I'm going to work on this thing, and then when it's done, I'm going to shift to this thing. It doesn't always work out that way. And, the critical thinking and then the problem solving portion of your work, it just ends up taking a real backseat to the time and energy that's spent in the drudgery. So definitely managing minutia is a big challenge. I would say also writing well. Having great technical acumen does not necessarily mean you're able to express that acumen effectively in the written form. And with that, it's not uncommon for AEC professionals to spend more time writing than actual authors whose name is their job. They write for a living, and they don't even write as much as some people in our profession. So you have, writing isn't why I got into this, and the conventional tools that I have to use put extra time and pressure on me to deliver a quality product. So that is a big challenge. And I would say the other thing too, balancing quality and efficiency, like that feels, I think sometimes for companies like it's that zero-sum game. If I'm going to be really efficient, that means my report isn't going to be as good as it can be. Like I have to put a lot of time and energy. That's the perception. I think it's drilled into us really early on. I actually remember I had this teacher in high school that used to say he graded his term papers by having a stack. He would stand at the top of his steps in his house with a stack of papers, and he'd throw them off the top of the staircase. And all the heavy ones that dropped on the top of the stairs, they would get an A, and the lighter ones that would flutter down to the bottom, those would get an F. So I don't know if he was serious, but it obviously made an impression on me. I still remember it to this day. And I think there's a little bit in the thinking for AEC professionals where like more is more. You know, they think that, you know, to be in this is something they're kind of being graded on rather than they're building a business deliverable for their customer to make a business decision. Okay. It's not going to be thrown off a staircase and measured on where it lands. Right. So I think the firms in the best position to be successful and profitable really do see their deliverables as business tools. And I think that that's part of the challenge for professionals to kind of break that thought process.
And it's prevalent, Kelly, because that's exactly right. We're taught that, you know, this paper needs to be 5 pages, 5 paragraphs. I got to, you know, be able to read it in 50 minutes, whatever the case is. But what you quickly learn is, I know you guys know, is a lot of the business world's about brevity, making decisions quickly. That's not always conducive to a long technical report. Now, can a technical report be lengthy because it needs to convey information? Absolutely. But it's less common, I think, than you would think first coming into the profession.
Yeah, and you see it a lot in our onboarding process where customers come in and they want to rebuild their templates exactly the way they have them. And we do that typically as a first step just to kind of build a comfort level. Like, look, it's here. But then we go through this transformation, this optimization process, and we put these 2 templates next to each other. Here's the optimized Quire version. Here's your kind of word-based version that you have now. And side by side. And when they see that, it's like, oh, well, I like this. I can see how it would transform this process and streamline it and make it just more palatable and more absorbable for the audience, which is their customer. So that's an important piece. I think you know, to manage that change in that mindset that is so baked in, showing the kind of before and after, like, oh, here's how you have it, here's how it could be, and letting them decide the pieces they want to keep or transform.
Which ultimately leads to a more efficient deliverable. And Chris, we'll take it back to you. How can automating the technical report development process enhance efficiency and productivity for AEC firms?
Yeah, so I think, you know, as I want to double click on some of the stuff that Kelly said, and her perspective is obviously as a practitioner, and I showed up here as a non-practitioner, so I'm flying at 30,000 feet. And when I look at the old world, as I call it, you know, the pre-Quire world in these companies, and this will hit on a lot of things Kelly said, you know, creating and delivering a report is hard inside these companies, right? It is hard. And if you just start by looking, and Kelly touched on this too, just look at the tooling, right? So whether it's, you know, the standard office productivity tools like Word and Excel that people are using to put these things together, whether it's internal systems that they're dealing with to extract data from, so an ERP or a project management system or CRM, whether it's a third-party data provider that they might need to tap into. There's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts, and then not even mentioning the fact that all these reports have associated assets, right? So they have photos and they have maps and they have illustrations and topographies and all these other assets that people are storing on servers and on their phones and in the cloud, right? So you have this massive set of disparate systems and tools that people are using. Like Kelly mentioned, you know, 4, 5, 6 people are contributing to this. So it's kind of like herding cats navigating that entire world. And the other interesting thing to me as I looked at it was much of the process is just muscle memory. right? It's not necessarily codified. It's in the heads of people. It's just the way we do things, right? So you put those three things together, and that's a pretty enormous business problem. So pivot now to a world like Quire. And what Quire has done is we've contained all of that, right, in one closed loop end-to-end platform. So you no longer have to rely on disparate tools. You can do it in one place. Your collaboration, your coordination of all the different people that are contributing to the process is happening in one place. You can have process and workflows that are automated but customized enough to kind of fit the way you work, but they're now modeled and they're codified inside the system and they're repeatable and standardized, right? So these are big game changers. And what we see is that when people embrace kind of the new way of doing things, they find enormous benefit in three big buckets. The first one is throughput. So people are just able to produce more. So we just did a study on the first 5 months of activity at Quire this year, and we found that our report volumes are up across our customers about 30% in just the same 5-month period, year over year. So that's huge. Cost is the second big bucket, right? So the ability to create a deliverable with better unit economics, to do it more efficiently. People are saving all kinds of time, like I mentioned, 40, 50, 60% of the time. That's huge, and that creates productivity benefits for you too. So all of a sudden you can start to do more with less. And then finally, as Kelly said, the quality thing. I love how Kelly approached this whole problem, which is this isn't about trade-offs. It's not like, do you want throughput or quality? Do you want cost or quality? This is about right? You can have all three. So quality is a huge thing. And when we look across the entire customer base, we see those benefits start to surface. Here's another example for you, Nick. As part of that study, we looked specifically at the number of customers that were able to increase volume while decreasing editing time in a report. And it's about a quarter of all Quire customers in the first 5 months of this year have been able to do that. So if you're a project-driven firm in the AEC world, right, all of a sudden you can grow your business, right, by doing more. And at the same time, you're doing it more cheaply. Your margins start to expand. You can invest in other areas of the business. So the ROI is really, really significant. And again, it all kind of comes back to the notion of having a closed loop end-to-end platform where all that stuff's contained.
Chris, you made a good point about how so much of this process, not written down necessarily, not codified in the head of, maybe a few key people who then teach younger engineers and so on and so forth. But it sounds like the platform really provides a way to make that maybe accessible to more people, more standardized, which is tied to efficiency gains, like you said. And as we know in this industry, if you're a consultant billing by the hour, time is money, less time spent, right?
Yep.
Making more money. So it sounds like a win for everybody involved.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I wouldn't be surprised if Kelly mentions this a little later on. One of the things we've been looking at closely as a company, either through our own surveys or studies that we've seen elsewhere, is this whole talent issue that exists inside the AEC vertical today, right? So whether it's finding talent, there's a scarcity of talent. Scarcity equals, more expensive talent, by the way. The labor costs are going up. And then we saw a study, Kelly, right, that said 41% of all AEC workers over the next 7 years will exit the workforce, either through retirement or they're just moving on to maybe greener fields, if there is such a thing. I don't know how anything could be greener than AEC. But so you get all these things happening at the exact same time. It's a perfect storm. And I think it's another reason why people have to lean in on technology as a lever to kind of overcome and meet some of these challenges.
Chris, that's actually a really good segue into our next question, which involves job satisfaction, right? So people come and go from the AE space for a number of reasons. And I think, Kelly, you can speak to this really well. But what impact is reducing report and proposal development time by up to 70% have on an AEC professional's workload and job satisfaction?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's pretty massive. I would speak to the job satisfaction part first. And, when you have users saying, thank you for inventing Quire, you have changed my world, or you make me look good in the eyes of my customer. Those are two actual quotes from our users. Like that, I mean, that means the world to me on a personal level. It's just as founding the company, particularly because I left the industry largely because of report writing. So if we can improve the experience for users so that they stay in their careers longer, I find that deeply rewarding, myself. And we've done polls of our users regarding their job satisfaction, where they're employed, and whether they felt they had the tools that they needed to do their jobs well. And they definitely reported significantly higher job satisfaction rates compared to the industry at large, which, by the way, includes a lot of Word users. So, there's a happiness factor there for sure, and satisfaction. But I'm also seeing, Chris was kind of touching upon it, like the industry that we serve, which is historically, been at the bottom 20% of industries adopting technology. They're at a technological tipping point. And they are investing more in tech, more in bespoke technological solutions, partially out of necessity because of the labor shortage that there is now and the impending one that is going to be pretty sizable. But also because it's hard to go backwards with technology. And what I mean by that is, when you think of it this way, I can't tell you the last time I hailed a taxi cab, but I can tell you the last time that I ordered an Uber. Once a disruptive technology reaches an underserved market, users don't want to go backwards. And we've had users say that they were not going to take a new job at another firm unless they used Quire or adopted Quire. And our users are, and no, I love our sales team, but they are our best salespeople in many ways because of that. So I would say, it's not just about the time savings, which obviously is significant from a business standpoint, but it is preserving these quality people in their critical thinking roles and having them get more satisfaction out of their jobs. That just, by that alone, makes them better at their jobs. And I think it's a very, like I said, very rewarding part, the most rewarding part of my job.
And Kelly, well said. And I just wanted to touch on one of the points you brought up, where AEC has traditionally lagged behind other industries in technological adoption. It's no secret. There's, any number of consultants who will put up everybody's favorite graph at conferences and tell us how, bad we are at tech, right? But what I like to tell everyone is all the technology really does is leave you more time to do whatever your job is, right? Kelly, we didn't go to civil engineering school to become engineers, but writing and communicating with your clients is a natural part of the job. There's a way to make that process more efficient so you can get back to doing what you love. I don't think anybody's going to argue with you on that.
No, I agree. I don't think anyone majored in creating photo galleries in Word, or, assembling PDF documents. No one went into that. And that is, there's people in this industry, again, they're deep thinkers, they're very determined, and they kind of plow through it. But I want to make the report writing a critical thinking exercise, put that in the front row seat again. And it can be, there's no reason why it can't. You prove it.
Absolutely. And Chris, we'll kick this one back to you. Another thing that Kelly had mentioned, right? This labor shortage. And let's kind of segue into our next question. What strategies do you believe are essential for AEC firms to handle economic challenges and competition based on your insights from the latest industry surveys?
Yeah, so in terms of industry challenges, we probably don't need to beat up anymore on labor. I mean, that's clear. That's just a huge impediment for a lot of AEC companies today. I think the second one, though, related in terms of a challenge is demand. So Kelly and I just attended a conference that was kind of focused on M&A that happens in this industry. And as part of that conference, there was a study showing what backlog has been doing across the industry over the last, 10 or 15 years. And it's at 9.8 months of backlog as of Q1. And that's up, I believe, close to 7%, just over what it was in Q4 the year before, right? So there is now, people are measuring backlog in months, not weeks, right? So that's another mass. You got this labor shortage, you got more work than you know what to do with it if you can get it. And then I do think competition is a constant in this industry as well. There are a lot of firms in this industry. So you have to be, the high quality, low cost provider. Customers are demanding, they want their stuff on time every time. So given that entire backdrop, again, to echo what Kelly said, I think it's about technology, but it's not just about throwing technology at the wall, right? All of a sudden going from a laggard to a type A company, just putting your arms around any piece of technology out there. I think AEC companies have to be pragmatic about this and thoughtful. And my advice to them would be that time to value is probably the one thing you should be focused on. What's the technology that you can implement, deploy, and adopt in the shortest amount of time that creates the maximum amount of value? And, I'm a little bit biased, but I would say technical report management probably checks those two boxes, because if you think about it, companies, these deliverables are basically the end product, the finished good that AEC firms are producing, and leaning in on technology that can streamline that is probably a great place to start. So that's how I see it, Nick. I think being thoughtful about it, and I think, again, one of the things that drew me to Quire is it seemed like such a thoughtful solution. It was an overlooked process, but critical to any AEC firm, and it just hasn't gotten the love or attention that it deserved, and Kelly brought that.
And Chris, you mentioned M&A kind of as your response to the last question. And for anyone listening, right, M&A activity in our industry and in certain niches, I can speak specifically to mine, is up and it's big. And one thing that, these companies as they're looking to acquire firms to roll into their larger businesses is their technology strategy. In consulting, right? How much revenue you can make is tied to your hourly rate and how quickly you can produce products. It's just the reality for a lot of firms out there. And having a tech stack with products that can make you more efficient is critical. And it's not just the day-to-day. It's, right, as a business owner, are you looking to exit? What's the valuation of your company? And so on and so forth. And we can talk about this all day, but I think everyone would agree that technology serves multiple masters, serves multiple purposes, and it is a good play for anyone in the industry. So that's great to hear.
Totally. Yeah, Kelly and I heard that I think M&A activity in this space is estimated to be in the 4 to 450 range in terms of transactions in 2024, and that's astounding. And I think you're right. A forward-thinking, forward-leaning company on the technology front can obviously increase their value, but I would also say that it's the post M&A stuff as well, where something like Quire can help. So as companies integrate, these acquisitions into the fabric of the parent, having consistent and repeatable and standardized processes and tools can be a synergy generator for them, both revenue synergies as well as cost synergies. And these acquisitions can absolutely become more creative in a more accelerated fashion.
And guys, another reason why, one company may acquire another is different service lines, different arm of the business, or just handling the type of work they already do, but needing more expertise, right? So Kelly, we'll kick it back to you. As projects in our industry become more complex, regulations evolve, et cetera, how can streamlining the technical report process help professionals keep up with these changes?
Yeah, well, I'll start with kind of how we think of streamlining is, what that means to us. I like to call it a concept of sensible automation to the report writing process. Certainly, there's low-hanging fruit in that regard. There's like the formatting, the assembly. Those are things that we do very well to help save time and create consistency. That certainly streamlines things. But it's also kind of managing the whole workflow, those handoffs. Like, you can automate notifications and inserting signatures and resumes. It's like technical report writing is death by 1,000 paper cuts. That is how I've always felt about it, and we can eliminate a lot of that blood loss in that process. And in doing so, I think, when you look at the human side of it, and speaking from one human to many other fellow humans that write reports, you don't have an unlimited amount of mental energy or mental energy in a given day. So if Quire can reduce the complexity, the time, again, that minutia associated with a company's, their most client-facing product, their technical report deliverable, then consultants can expend that bandwidth on the complexities of the project's content, right? So in dealing with the complexity, it's better to have more focus, more time, more energy to do that, right? So from a practical energy expenditure. But then I'd say as kind of as a process piece, just maintaining swim lanes and enforcing a process. You want to create a report when it had this kind of consistent flywheel, if you will. You're churning out providing these services. You're churning out consistent reports at high quality. It's very important to have these enforced processes along those lines. So it's difficult to tackle a complex project when you have people kind of going rogue and doing things their own way, using that old template or, kind of deviating from the standards, or in the M&A side of things, you're bringing in a new company. They have one way of attacking the service line and your company has another. Like, how do you blend those things so that you're one logo, not acting as multiple logos, right? So, it's very hard to corral that if the system you're using wasn't built to do it. So I think that's a big piece too, like providing those guardrails and so on. I would also kind of think about training and mentorship. That's a big one because it's oftentimes people kind of, especially new, like next generation, or even just new employees. Maybe they're senior and they're taking on a new job. Kind of tend to get thrown in. There's not always, a really robust training or mentorship program at companies because everyone's so busy. It's kind of hard to do that. So you think about who's going to train that next generation or the current generation to tackle these complex projects that we're talking about. Quire isn't just a tool in that way. It's not just about saving time. It really is going to be an archive for all of your technical content. So it's a resource to mine that information that your most experienced people have, drafted over years. So our customers we've had for like over a decade, they have tens of thousands of reports in there. That's where you look at, just the value of potentially some AI tools to kind of mine that information, help train and mentor, kind of have some of those tools baked into the system. So, and, our tool also has, guidance and instruction that, companies can, again, incorporate into their templates, into their work product to ensure that their employees are doing a good job with less effort. So it gets back to that. It's not a zero-sum game. And, the complexity we're seeing more and more complexity as you stated in your question. So how can we address that in the tool itself? I think that's a really important factor.
And Kelly, you hit on, I think, another really important topic, going back to Chris's statistic, right? Like 41% of individuals in the industry exiting in, some period of time in the future. And like we talk about retirement and generational knowledge transfer, you have a principal who's been in the game 40, 50 years, and you don't have a great way to capture what they've learned and store that and pass it on to the next generation, besides, the mentorship piece. But I'm talking about like, what do you do? Like, how do you capture all that info? But you have a decade, 15 years worth of reports, technical content, et cetera, with, right, advents in large language models and other AI computer processing. A lot of, I think, what was only a dream a few years ago is now a reality. So that's another piece I would tell companies to pay attention to is as people move on in their careers and lives, you have significant opportunity to capture what the value they've continued to bring and continue on even after they're no longer with the firm.
Absolutely. Like all that knowledge goes out the door in the next 7 years. You still have this archive that you want that information to be stored in a way that you can access it really effectively. I mean, when I wrote reports, I used to overwrite old reports. I got a new one. I find that old one I did that kind of resembled this one, and I'd overwrite it. And it took me usually an hour to try to find it. I'd open up and I just, just trying to remember it, we can transform that. I really believe that even to address the complexity, the tools are rising to the occasion. It just comes down to companies taking advantage of them. They're there. They just need to take advantage of them.
And on that same thread, Chris, what are some other innovations in technical report management that you're finding that are significantly impacting the professionals you guys serve?
Yeah, maybe the biggest epiphany I had once I got here, if we pulled 20 service line leaders from a bunch of different firms into a room, the three of us, and we polled them and we asked them questions like, how many technical reports did your team produce last month or last quarter or last year? How long did it take? What was the average cost associated with that? They would struggle. I'm convinced. It's a test I run every time I go to a trade show and I ask people. And so the first innovation that I'd probably mention is probably not the one you'd expect, which would be, something like AI, which is certainly important. But for me, it's about, as a manager, line of sight visibility into the deliverable process. We talked a lot already about how Quire has created this closed loop platform where you can contain all this. But what we didn't mention is that we also wrap it with a really rich set of analytics. And for the first time, our customers can actually see what they're doing. Our customers can answer all of those questions, right? Which I think is really powerful because it goes to the old adage, you can't manage what you can't measure. I would add on to it, you can't measure what you can't see. And one of the things that Quire has done with the platform is bring a level of visibility into the deliverable management process that just didn't exist there in the past. So I think that is a massive, massive innovation that we offer and one that companies need to take advantage of. And then the second one, I'll just echo what Kelly said. I think, we're already moving out on the AI front, but yeah, AI is another massive, important lever for these companies. The ability to parse data at the volumes of which we store it, both, structured and unstructured data, is going to be a game changer for these companies, whether it's the use case Kelly mentioned, which is, just finding that report from your past, or whether it's things like portfolio analysis, right? And that's before you even get to the generative capabilities of AI, about generating summaries or putting findings together. So in our mind, I think those are two add-on levers that people can take advantage of in a really, really meaningful way to move the needle on their business moving forward.
Yeah, Chris, well said. And I think I would agree with you there, both on the metrics and analytics for those who are maybe managing technical professionals but aren't in the weeds as much. And, I feel like there's new advances in AI daily at this point. And we've had a lot of great episodes from individuals in different fields. So it's all very exciting. But Kelly, I'll kick it back to you for our final question. So we've talked about a lot today, from old ways of doing things, right? How behind AEC seems to be, to a different way of doing an old school process. Can be a lot to take in for maybe just your rank and file engineer, or even some of the principals out there that are listening.
Yeah.
What piece of advice would you give engineers at all levels that are looking to leverage new tech to enhance operational efficiency?
Yeah, well, one thing that I have observed in being in the AEC industry in different facets, right, from actually being as a practitioner to then kind of selling to them and then building a product for them. So seeing it from a few different vantage points, it just seems that there's this recessive gene in AEC professionals to work harder right? To push through till the job is done, right? It's not that, whatever it takes to get it done. And there's this fastidiousness and there's this determination that serves them really well when you're talking about the critical thinking portion of their jobs. But those same instincts start to work against them and get diminishing returns when it's not in the weeds of the content, but in like how they build the actual deliverable, in the tactile drudgery of how they pull all of that information together into a report. So, with that in mind, we're at this sort of like this work harder kind of mentality. I would really just encourage engineers and scientists and anyone in the AEC market to just keep an open mind towards software and pay attention to the ways in which technology is serving you better in your personal life compared to your professional life. Because the biggest impediment to adopting an innovative solution like Quire in this market, you know what the biggest impediment is? Inertia. Just keep doing it the same way we've been doing it. It is inertia. It's nothing more than that. That is the number one biggest impediment. So to take some practical takeaways, if you are evaluating like a technical solution, something bespoke to your process, and you want to see like some things you could look for, as you're looking at a company like a Quire or something similar, how do they manage their onboarding? Like ask those questions. Like, what does that onboarding process look like? What kind of support is provided? Is that an extra? Is that included? Look for technology that has a track record. I know how much Quire's improved through trial and error, right? You put something out, it gets better. Ask for references for people that use it. Is it pretty much, it's pretty much the same stuff I had since day one, or no, they took suggestions, it evolved, it stayed ahead of the curve. Those are things that you absolutely should ask. And you can even ask to see their release notes for any technology. I think that will make you feel more comfortable about managing something that can feel like a really big change. Because ultimately, in the big picture, you have to consider that you're not investing in technology for how it works today. You're investing in it for how it works a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. That's really important. Ask for roadmaps. Ask for how much of their budget literally is committed to R&D. I'll tell you, if a prospective customer came to us and they asked these questions, they would be the most educated buyer that I have ever encountered in my 14 years at Quire. And so there's absolutely, I hope those takeaways, like have an open mind, know that it's possible, that it's only really inertia that's holding you guys back, and then ask those questions. It'll make you feel better about the next step that you take, which is going to empower your people and make them happier at their jobs. And you're going to have better deliverables and work products as a result too. There's no reason why it can't be a win-win in that way.
Well said. And I'll offer an example, Kelly, to follow up is on having that open mind. I remember the way we used to create photo appendices, and I know you guys will appreciate this, was literally dragging photo by photo into a Word document. Yep. Photo one. And one day I just looked at it and I said, it's ridiculous. So the amount of time you're able to build, a couple hundred photo appendix, a little bit of searching. Here's a gallery add in, boom, boom, boom. And now we've just saved 10 engineers, multiple hours a month by having that open mind. And that thought process, I think, leads you to considering options and not pushing ahead. And I really agree with what you said, Kelly, that get the job done at all costs can work against you because you're so focused on plowing ahead, getting it done, instead of taking a step back and saying, hey, is there a better way to do this?
Exactly.
But Chris and Kelly, thank you both so much for joining us today. If the listeners want to find out more about Quire or interested in any of the points you guys made today, what is the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, I would say visit our website at openquire.com is probably the easiest way to do it. There's a wealth of information out there, more being added all the time in terms of content. And also pay attention to the LinkedIn pages, right? Please follow us. We're constantly doing webinars, educating everybody about technical report management. Kelly just did a crazy good webinar earlier this week that covered a lot of the benefits associated with TRM. So you can find us that way as well. And thank you, Nick, for having us. We're delighted to be here.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Nick. And this is an exciting year for us. I know, just like on the product side, we have some major advances. So I just want to underscore what Chris said of like, stay tuned, because there's some really great stuff that's coming out from our product. I'd love for you to learn more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anyone who is just listening, driving, maybe didn't have a pen handy, you'll be able to find all of that info in the show notes. But Kelly and Chris, thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nick.
Please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at aectechpodcast.com. There, you will find a summary of key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all of your engineering and technology endeavors. Thank you.